My sister always knew how to own a room. Even as a kid, she had this elegant, magnetic confidence. Chin high, hair perfect, eyes sharp. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the thinker. The one teachers said was gifted but odd, the one family members politely referred to as bookish. In my father's words, I was the daughter who would probably figure it out eventually. I'm Eva. I'm 38, single, and live in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery in Portland that always smells like bread and burnt sugar. I work in cognitive systems engineering, which sounds glamorous until you see my workspace. A cluttered desk, 3 monitors, and a cat named Pixel who walks across my keyboard whenever he feels like reminding me he exists. My family never understood what I did. They never tried. My sister, however, needed no explanation. Cassandra, the golden child, co-founded an investment firm the moment she turned 30. Hanover Reeves. Big glass building, expensive suits, a smile that could hypnotize shareholders. The kind of company my father bragged about in golf clubs and overpriced whiskey bars. He never bragged about me. So when her wedding invitation arrived, ivory cardstock, gold leaf, her name in serif font larger than her fiancé's, I hesitated. But not going would have been another reason for them to talk about me, so I RSVP'd yes. I bought a slate blue dress on sale and wrapped her gift in plain white paper, a framed print of the Milky Way. Something meaningful, something she would likely dismiss as nerdy. The wedding took place at a renovated vineyard estate. Crystal chandeliers, a live jazz quartet, people wearing diamonds the size of grapes. I walked in alone, nodded politely at relatives who barely remembered my name, then found a seat near the back. And then came the toast. Cassandra stood under a canopy of fairy lights, champagne flute lifted, glowing in the soft gold beams like she'd been born under a spotlight. I just want to thank everyone for coming, she said, smiling. 300 friends and family, wow. People murmured in admiration. And my husband, she added, beaming at him. My brilliant husband. Everyone applauded. Then she shifted, eyes sparkling with mischief. And my sister, Eva. My stomach tightened. She can't even afford her rent, Cassandra laughed into the mic. But hey, she's following her passion. A wave of laughter rolled across the vineyard. Real laughter, loud laughter. Even my parents joined in. My father wiped tears from the corners of his eyes, leaning into my mother as if the joke was too good to handle. I forced a smile and lifted my glass. That tiny, quiet gesture no one noticed except maybe the caterer and God. I left early, unnoticed, slipping into a rideshare and returning to an apartment where the heat clanked like an old man's knee. I reheated leftover soup and sat on the couch while Pixel curled up next to me. I told myself I didn't care, that I was used to this, that humiliation had been stitched into the fabric of my family dynamic long ago. But my hands trembled when I went to bed. And then, morning came. I woke to 6 missed calls and 1 voicemail from an unfamiliar number. I pressed play as I poured coffee. Eva? Hi, it's Daniel, Cassandra's husband. His voice was tight, strained. Could you call me back? As soon as you can? I'm looking at some documents regarding the neural interface acquisition Hanover Reeves completed. And your name is on the patent. I stared at my phone. My name, on their patent, the one they acquired 3 months before the wedding. I played it again just to confirm I'd heard it correctly. They bought the startup I'd quietly consulted for last year. I'd written the baseline algorithm for the adaptive module, and under the recommendation of our legal advisor, we filed a provisional patent listing all contributors, including me. Hanover Reeves, my sister's firm, didn't own the intellectual property outright. They needed my signature to advance their newly announced product line, the one they were pinning their next investment cycle on, the one they'd already teased to major partners. My humiliation last night? Suddenly irrelevant. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the disappointment. I was the obstacle, the missing piece, the leverage. I looked out the window at the slow-moving morning traffic, the weak sunlight reflecting off damp concrete. Everything looked the same, but something had undeniably shifted. Not outwardly, not yet. But inside me, a fault line had cracked open. Pixel nudged my leg, unaware that my entire family system had just tilted on its axis. I took a deep breath. Then I called Daniel back. When Daniel picked up my call, he didn't even bother with hello. Eva, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. His voice was tight in a way that made my skin prickle. This wasn't the polished, camera-ready husband from the wedding speeches. This man sounded worried. What's going on? I asked, even though I already knew. He exhaled sharply. I was reviewing the due diligence documents for the neural interface acquisition. I don't handle the tech side, but something didn't add up, so I dug deeper. And your name, your full legal name, is listed as a contributing inventor, Eva Carter. It's on the original patent filing. That's correct, I said calmly. You knew about this? I filed it, I replied. Silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that stretches and snaps. I need to ask something, he finally said. Why didn't you tell Cassandra, or me? You never asked. Another silence, this one heavier. Eva, things are complicated right now. The team is set to pitch a multi-year integration plan to a defense contractor next week. They believe they own the IP. They don't. They own part of it, not my contribution. He swore under his breath. Look, he said, voice thinning. The legal department will reach out. Just don't do anything rash. This is serious. I almost laughed at that. Serious? Tell that to the 300 people who laughed at me last night like I was a punchline on a cheap comedy show. But I didn't lash out. I didn't scream or throw blame. I simply said, I'll respond when they contact me. That seemed to rattle him. Eva, please. This is going to be a big deal. I know, I said. Good luck. I hung up before he could say anything else. The email came 2 hours later, polite, formal, and clearly frantic under the Ivy League phrasing. We would like clarification regarding your involvement in the neural interface project. Please confirm your contributions and availability for a meeting as soon as possible. I made coffee, read it twice, then typed a short response. Yes, I contributed to the project as a co-inventor. All filings are accurate. I am open to discussing terms regarding the use of my intellectual property. No threats, no drama, just facts. That's when my phone buzzed. Cassandra. Her name flashing on the screen felt like a punch to the ribs. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, the same way she ignored me for months at a time unless she needed something. But a small part of me, a part I thought was long dead, wanted to hear her reaction. Wanted to know how she sounded when she realized she'd stepped on a landmine with my name on it. I answered. Eva, she said immediately, skipping greetings. What the hell is going on? Her voice was sharp, brittle, the voice she used when a deal fell apart or someone smudged her perfect image. You tell me, I replied. I'm getting emails from legal saying your name is on the neural interface patent. Why wouldn't you say anything? You never asked. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Her breath hitched, the sound she made when she didn't get her way. This is serious, she said. We're in the middle of negotiations. You can't just hold this over us. I'm not holding anything over anyone, I said calmly. Your firm bought a company without checking the full patent documentation. That's on you. A beat, then another. Eva, what do you want? I knew the moment the words left her mouth that she regretted them. Cassandra never asked what I wanted. She told me what she wanted, what I should want, what the world supposedly wanted from people like her. But this wasn't her arena anymore. I haven't decided, I said. And then, I did what she's done to me countless times. I ended the call mid-sentence. That afternoon, I went for a walk. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that wakes up your lungs. I passed the bakery downstairs, warm sourdough wafting into the street, and let myself breathe. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel small, or dismissed, or invisible. Something had shifted, not dramatically, not with fireworks or a grand revelation, more like a quiet click, a puzzle piece falling into place after years of misalignment. They needed me. My sister, her firm, their multi-million-dollar aspirations, they all needed something only I could give. And I hadn't even asked for that power. I'd simply done my work, quietly, thoroughly, the same way I always had. As I reached the end of the street, my phone buzzed again. Not legal. Not Cassandra. Not Daniel. My father. His voicemail was only 7 seconds long. Tight, clipped, and cold. Eva, call me back. There's been a misunderstanding. Don't make this bigger than it is. I exhaled slowly. Every part of me knew this was only the beginning. But for once, the beginning wasn't terrifying. It was mine. I didn't call my father back, not immediately. Not after everything he'd said about me for years, small jabs disguised as advice, jokes that always landed on my ribs, reminders that Cassandra was the pride of the family and I was something between an afterthought and a cautionary tale. So I let his call sit there, blinking on my screen like an unpaid bill. The next morning, I woke to an email from Hanover Reeves' senior legal counsel requesting a formal meeting. Urgent. Mandatory. As soon as possible. They offered a series of time slots, all within the next 24 hours. That level of panic was almost flattering. I forwarded the message to a lawyer I'd worked with years ago during my graduate research disputes. His name was Alan. He was calm, steady, and had a voice that sounded like he'd been negotiating since birth. He called me within 10 minutes. So, he said, your family stepped on a landmine and didn't notice until smoke started rising from their shoes. A small laugh escaped my throat. Something like that. Send me the patent, Eva. I'll review everything. Do not agree to anything before we talk. I won't. I hung up, feeling a strange mixture of nausea and power. At noon, my father called again. This time, I answered. Eva, he said, sounding rushed and annoyed. Why aren't you responding to Cassandra? She's worried sick. I almost snorted. Worried? About me? About my feelings? Dad, she only cares because her company needs my signature. He sighed like he was dealing with a stubborn child. This isn't the time to get emotional. I'm not emotional, I replied. I'm being factual. Then do the right thing, he snapped. Fix it. Sign whatever they need. Don't create a spectacle. There it was. The family motto. Don't create a spectacle. Meaning, smooth things over quietly, even when you're the one hurt. I haven't created anything, I said evenly. They bought a company without doing proper due diligence. This is business, Eva. You don't understand how these things work. I understand perfectly, I said. He exhaled sharply through his nose, his trademark gesture of disapproval. Fine. What do you want? He asked. Funny how quickly the question changed tone depending on who asked it. When Cassandra said it, she sounded threatened. When my father said it, he sounded annoyed, like I was an obstacle that had rolled into his golf course. I'm not sure yet, I said. My attorney is reviewing everything. Attorney? He repeated, as if I'd just said I'd hired an assassin. Eva, hiring a lawyer sends the wrong message. No, I said quietly. It sends the right one. A pause. A long one. You're being unreasonable, he said finally. Think about the family. I replied. Probably more than any of you ever did when it came to me. Before he could launch into a lecture, I ended the call. My hand shook when I set the phone down, but not from fear, from something else, something like release. 2 hours later, Cassandra showed up at my apartment unannounced. I recognized the knock before I even reached the door, a rapid, impatient rhythm that matched her heartbeat whenever she'd been denied something. I opened it a crack. She looked perfect, of course. Designer coat, sculpted curls, wedding ring gleaming, but her eyes told the truth. Wide, frantic, a little desperate. Eva, she breathed, pushing her way inside before I could invite her. You can't ignore us like this. I crossed my arms. You seemed happy ignoring me for years. She winced. Even she couldn't pretend that wasn't true. Look, she said, pacing in my small living room like a caged animal. We didn't know about the patent. Legal overlooked it. Fine. But this is huge. The board is panicking. The product line. That's not my problem, I said. She froze. Her voice softened. Eva, please, just tell me what you want. It was the second time she'd asked me that in 2 days. The words sounded foreign coming from her mouth. I want acknowledgement, I said, of what I built, of what I contributed, of who I am. Her jaw clenched. Fine, whatever you need, but right now we need your signature. Then negotiate with my lawyer. Her eyes widened like I'd slapped her. Your lawyer? She repeated. God, Eva, you're making this worse. No, I said quietly. I'm finally making it fair. Her breath caught. Not out of anger this time, but surprise. Maybe even recognition. She looked around my apartment then. Really looked. Not with judgment, but with something almost like understanding. She'd never stepped foot in my home before. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. My life, small and quiet and honest. I never meant to humiliate you, she said softly. At the wedding? I asked. Her cheeks flushed. That got out of hand. You made me a joke in front of 300 people, I said. My parents laughed, you laughed, and none of you apologized. She looked down. For once, Cassandra had no comeback. I'm not signing anything under pressure, I said. When my lawyer finishes reviewing the contract, we'll talk. She swallowed hard. Okay. It was the first honest word she'd said all day. Then she left. Quietly. No theatrics. And I realized something as I watched her disappear down the stairs. This wasn't just business. This was the first time in my life where they were forced to see me. Alan called me early the next morning. I reviewed the patent, he said without preamble. Your contribution is substantial, Eva. This isn't something they can wave away with a settlement offer. So they can't push me out? No. They need your consent to proceed with any commercialization involving your module. They're stuck. I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Today's meeting, he continued, is not about clarifying your involvement. It's about them figuring out how little they can give you to make you disappear. Don't agree to anything. I'll handle the talking. Even if they get aggressive? He chuckled. Aggressive is my playground. For the first time in days, I felt steady. The meeting was scheduled at Hanover Reeves' downtown office, 24th floor, all glass walls and polished marble that smelled faintly of lemon and money. If I had an inferiority complex about my work or my apartment or my life, this place would have fed it perfectly. But today, strangely, I didn't feel small. Alan and I were escorted to a private conference room with a long table and an even longer view of the skyline. Cassandra wasn't there yet, neither was Daniel. Instead, 3 legal representatives were waiting, one of them looking like she'd had 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee. Miss Carter, the lead counsel said, standing to shake my hand. Thank you for coming. Of course, I replied. This concerns my work. She flinched, just slightly. They weren't used to me speaking with confidence. They were used to the version of me my family presented. Awkward, fragile, unimportant. Not this Eva. Alan opened his briefcase with the casualness of a man who dismantled empires on a Tuesday. Let's begin, he said. For the first 30 minutes, their approach was soft. Too soft. They praised the unexpected discovery of Eva's contributions. They emphasized the value of collaboration. They insisted this was all a huge misunderstanding. Alan let them talk until they ran out of air. Then he asked the question they hoped he wouldn't. What are you offering? Their faces tightened. The lead counsel slid a folder across the table. A good faith settlement, a lump sum, generous by industry standards, in exchange for assignment of her rights. I didn't reach for it. Alan did, skimmed the first page, then closed it. No, he said simply. The woman blinked. You haven't even... No. A soft, sharp silence cut through the room. The younger attorney, trying a different angle, leaned forward. Miss Carter, this is standard. Settlements prevent conflict and allow the company to move quickly. You'll be compensated. I'm not giving away my work, I said. They didn't expect me to speak. Not then. Not with that tone. The lead counsel cleared her throat. Miss Carter, surely you understand the pressure we're under. There are timelines. Investors? Those are your problems, Alan said. Not hers. The air shifted. The temperature fell. This was no longer a polite meeting. The door opened. Cassandra swept in, cheeks flushed, eyes darting between us and the untouched folder on the table. She looked like she'd run through an airport. Eva, she said breathlessly, can we talk? No, Alan said before I could respond. We're in the middle of negotiations. She shot him a glare. I'm talking to my sister. I met her eyes. Then talk. Her voice dropped to a whisper-sharp tone. Why are you doing this? A humorless laugh escaped me. Doing what? Protecting my work? You're blowing this out of proportion. I softened nothing. You humiliated me in front of 300 people. Your company underestimated me. Both of those were your choices, not mine. She swallowed hard. Her voice wavered, just barely. Fine. What do you want, Ava? Alan stepped in. A licensing agreement. Profit share. Proper recognition on all materials. And an advisory position. Her jaw dropped. What? You need her, Alan said. You can posture all you want, but your firm can't move forward without her consent. Cassandra looked stunned, not offended, not angry, just genuinely unprepared. As if it had never once occurred to her in her entire life that she might need me for anything. The negotiation resumed, this time with real stakes. Voices rose, papers shuffled, legal jargon filled the air like smoke. And through it all, I stayed quiet, steady, grounded. Not because I was intimidated, because I was listening. Because for the first time, they were forced to talk around me, through me, about me, as if I mattered. After 2 hours, nothing was finalized. But everything was different. We walked out with acknowledgement. Leverage. A seat at the table they once pretended I wasn't qualified to enter. In the elevator down, Alan turned to me. You handled yourself well. I barely spoke. That's why, he said. People who underestimate you never expect silence to be strength. As the elevator doors opened onto the lobby, I saw Cassandra standing off to the side, arms folded, expression unreadable. She looked at me differently than she ever had before. Not with pity. Not with superiority. With awareness. For the first time in our lives, she finally saw me. 2 weeks passed before the next major shift happened. The negotiations dragged on. Emails, drafts, counteroffers, phone calls at odd hours. Alan handled most of it, but I reviewed every document, every clause, every attempt Hanover Reeves made to minimize my role. They tried subtle pressure first, then urgency, then politeness so sharp it could cut glass. But the truth didn't bend, and neither did I. The agreement wasn't final yet, but the outcome was becoming clear. They would have to give me everything I asked for. A licensing deal. A profit share. Proper recognition. A seat on the advisory board. Every meeting ended the same way. Cassandra furious, the legal team exhausted, and Daniel lingering afterward, as if wanting to say something he never quite did. Then, out of nowhere, my uncle sent a group email. Thanksgiving at my place in Lakewood this year. Would love to see you all. It's been too long. I almost laughed. The timing was uncanny. Clearly, the family grapevine had been working overtime. Cassandra replied to the email within minutes. We'll be there. My father replied next. Of course. Normally, I would decline. I'd stay home with takeout and a documentary, pretending it didn't bother me. But this year felt different, like a chapter I needed to close. So I replied, I'll come. Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and bright, the kind of New England crispness that feels like glass when you inhale. My uncle's house was warm and loud, filled with clattering dishes and relatives I hadn't seen in years. When I walked in, conversations paused. Not dramatically. Just long enough for people to register that I wasn't the version of Eva they remembered. I wore a dark burgundy coat, a simple necklace, hair neatly pinned back. I looked like myself, but in focus. My uncle hugged me first. Eva, it's been too long. I smiled. Thanks for inviting me. Behind him, my father appeared, straightening his sweater as if preparing for a board meeting. Eva, he said stiffly, glad you could make it. Glad, but surprised. He'd expected me to hide. I said I would, I replied. We stood facing each other for a beat, and for the first time in my life, he was the one who looked unsure. Then Cassandra walked in from the kitchen, holding a tray of appetizers like it was a prop in a photo shoot. Her smile froze when she saw me. Hi. Hi. She stared at me for a second too long, like she was recalibrating who I was. Daniel stepped up beside her. He looked at me with something like relief. I'm glad you came, he said quietly. Me too. Dinner was tense, but polite. Conversations about travel, sports, new jobs. Every now and then, someone would glance my way with thinly veiled curiosity. Finally, one of my cousins, a decent guy who didn't have a mean bone in his body, asked the question everyone else was dancing around. "So, Eva," he said, spooning mashed potatoes onto his plate, "I heard Hanover Reeves invested in that neural tech thing you were working on. Are you involved with that?" Before I could answer, Cassandra jumped in. "Well, technically, that's not accurate," I cut in calmly. She froze. The table quieted. I continued, my voice steady, not performative, just truthful. "I co-wrote the patent for the adaptive module they acquired. My work is part of the foundation of the product line." My cousin blinked. "Wait, seriously?" Daniel, without looking at his wife, said quietly, "Eva was a primary contributor." A soft ripple moved through the table, subtle but unmistakable. Recognition. Respect. Surprise. Not the kind I'd had at the wedding. Not humiliation disguised as humor. This time, it was understanding. My father cleared his throat. "Well, that's impressive." I didn't smile. I didn't rush to reassure him. I just nodded. "Thank you." And something in his expression shifted. Barely. But undeniably. A crease softened, his shoulders lowered by a fraction of an inch. As if it had finally occurred to him that maybe, just maybe, he'd misjudged me. Dinner continued in a new rhythm, careful but balanced. Cassandra remained quiet, processing. Daniel filled gaps with gentle conversation. My uncle kept praising the turkey. And for once, I didn't feel like an outsider seated at the wrong table. I felt present, seen, equal. After dessert, when people were drifting into smaller circles of conversation, Cassandra approached me on the back porch. The cold air made her breath visible. She wrapped her arms around herself. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Not dramatic, not forced, just honest. For the wedding and for a lot of things before that." I didn't speak. Not yet. "I thought you were drifting," she said. "I thought you didn't want more out of life. I didn't understand your work, so I assumed it wasn't important." I swallowed. It was important to me. "I know," she said, voice catching. "I'm sorry." Silence settled between us. Not hostile, not cold, just real. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. Because sometimes, the smallest apology is the loudest shift. When I left that evening, the air felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, far from it, but because something fundamental had changed. They no longer saw me as the disappointment, and I no longer needed them to. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, the agreement was finalized. No dramatic showdown, no shouting match, just signatures, documents, and the quiet sound of the world shifting into a new configuration, one where my name finally had weight. I sat in Alan's office across from him as he flipped through the last page and nodded. "That's it," he said. "It's done." I lifted the pen and signed beside my printed name. Eva Carter, co-inventor, licensing partner, advisory board member. For a moment, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel victorious. I felt anchored, seen. "Congratulations," Alan said, sliding the papers into a folder. "You did this the right way. Rare quality these days." I smiled softly. "Thank you for everything." He shook his head. "You stood up for yourself. I just made sure the paperwork matched what was already true." That sentence stayed with me. 2 days later, I received the first quarterly profit share. The number made me sit down. It wasn't billionaire-level money, but it was more than enough to change how I breathed. Enough to eliminate the fear of losing my rent if my contract ended. Enough to finally build something of my own. I didn't rush to tell anyone. I didn't post about it. I didn't celebrate loudly. I walked to the bookstore 2 blocks from my apartment, bought a hardcover journal, and wrote one line on the first page. "This is the first day of my real life." Pixel sat on the table watching me with his usual judgment, but even he seemed calmer. A week later, Hanover Reeves scheduled the first advisory board meeting. I half expected them to treat me like a figurehead, a decorative title to appease legal obligations. But when I walked into the sleek conference room on the 20th floor, something strange happened. People stood when I entered. Actual, real people, engineers, analysts, investors, rose from their seats as if acknowledging someone they respected. I wasn't ready for the rush that went through me. I wasn't ready for how steady I felt when I took my seat at the table. Cassandra arrived late, 5 minutes, which for her was practically an apology. She slid into the chair beside me, her expression softer than I'd seen in years. "Glad you're here," she murmured. And for once, I believed her. Daniel smiled across the table. "Eva, could you walk us through the adaptive modules integration pathway?" No one had ever asked me to explain my work in a room that actually needed the answer. For the next 30 minutes, I did what I was born to do. I explained. I taught. I built bridges between chaos and clarity. And they listened. Really listened. When the meeting ended, people shook my hand. Someone asked if I'd be open to reviewing a prototype. Another asked if I'd present to their development team next month. For the first time, I walked out of an office feeling taller than when I'd walked in. Around mid-December, Cassandra invited me to coffee. Not at some pretentious rooftop brunch spot, just a small cafe near the park, one with wobbly wooden tables and mismatched mugs. She arrived before me, sitting with her hands wrapped around a steaming cup. When I sat down, she looked nervous. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began. "About acknowledgement, about how I treated you." I didn't interrupt. "I thought success made me better than other people," she admitted quietly. "Especially you. And that was wrong. I see that now." Her voice cracked slightly. Cassandra never cried unless it benefited her, but this wasn't for show. "For what it's worth," she continued, "I'm proud of you, truly, and I'm sorry." For years, I'd dreamed of hearing those words, imagined they'd come with fireworks, catharsis, applause. But sitting there, across from my sister, the apology didn't make me victorious. It made me human. "Thank you," I said gently. "I appreciate that." We talked for an hour. Not as competitors, not as siblings tangled in old hierarchies. Just two women navigating adulthood, realizing the world is bigger and softer when you let it be. When we stood to leave, she hugged me. Not the brittle embrace she used for social gatherings. Something real. On the last day of the year, I signed a lease for a small condo near the waterfront, a place with wide windows, a quiet office space, and room for a future that didn't feel temporary. I framed the patent and hung it near my desk. Not as a trophy. As a reminder that even the quietest person in the room can hold something powerful. A reminder that worth doesn't disappear just because others fail to recognize it. A reminder that sometimes life doesn't change through revenge or confrontation, but through taking the place you always deserved. On New Year's morning, I stood at my window watching the harbor turn gold with sunrise. I wasn't the disappointment anymore. I wasn't the joke told into a microphone at a wedding. I was exactly who I'd always been. Only now, the world finally knew it. And as I held my mug to my lips, warm steam rising, I whispered the truth out loud. This is only the beginning.